And away we go. Welcome to Three Guys and an iPad, the proverbial water cooler of the mortgage and real estate industry. I'm Brian Rieger of Content Beacon, and I am one of those three guys. We wouldn't be much here without the other two, so let's get right to it. Mr. Rick Grant is with us, as always, today of RGA PR and co-founder at Content Beacon. Rick, how are you holding up, sir?
Doing well despite everything, Brian. It's good to see you again.
Well, good to see you as well. And today, straight to us from the Great Depression, it's Kevin Breeland. He's also in Austin at the moment. And if you didn't know, he's from Amplify Credit Union down there. Kevin, tell us a little more about the look and feel today.
Well, I just decided it was time to mix it up a little bit. Of course, it is my weekly goal to surprise you every week. So I thought this would do it.
Surprise animes, Kevin. Surprise animes. Keep up the good work, sir. And if you're wondering behind me here, I have a first grade daughter. She's doing some homeschooling. So if anyone can help me solve this problem, just leave it in the show notes, please. This is the part of the podcast, of course, where we give the shameless plug to Content Beacon, our producer. And that's the industry's only B2B content marketing agency. So if you're a warehouse lender trying to reach correspondents, if you're a wholesale lender trying to reach brokers, and of course, if you're any kind of lender trying to reach realtors, I'm not sure which of you aren't, then maybe we can help you out there. So, reach out to us also if you have ideas about, folks you'd like to see on the podcast or topics you'd like us to discuss. We are at brian@contentbeacon.com or rick@contentbeacon.com. I'd also like to give a special thanks to our friend Rob Crispin. Gave us a little shout out this week on his April 2nd blog. I suspect that has more to do with the fact that Brian Levy was our guest, and we thank Brian for joining us. But nonetheless, Rob, thank you for the shout out there. Now, without further ado, let's get right down to it. Kevin Breeland would like to know if we're kidding him.
Well, thank you, Brian. And so I would like to first start out with, and one of the reasons why you see the background behind me that you do, is apparently the pandemic is causing a rush back to living in rural areas. And so behind me, I thought this would be very appropriate. This is the little town I grew up in. And you can't really see, but right behind me is a line of people with their show cabs, and the second person in that line is my dad. This picture was taken in 1948. And but this is a town that I grew up in. Pretty much looks the same way, except there's not nearly as many people, and it's declined a great deal over the past. But when I was reading this article, I thought it was very interesting to hear that I believe it was, and you might know this better than I do, Rick, I think somewhere around 2015, 2016, our city populations for the first time in our history surpassed our rural populations. And so it would be kind of nice to see that reverse a little bit, so little towns like the one I grew up in don't dry up and fade away.
Great.
The second thing I wanted to bring up, and I kind of gave both of y'all some homework, was you're a sports franchise owner. How have you benefited from COVID-19, the shutdown of all sports, and why? And then I have my answer to this. So we'll start with you, Brian.
Oh, no, let's defer to Rick on that. He's the smarter one.
Oh, God. I really thought about that a lot. And I think if I owned a sports franchise right now, I'd be looking at alternate forms of financing and calling in on my insurance stuff, because this is a nightmare, I would think, for sports. I don't know, Brian, what do you think?
Well, as I understand it, I don't believe a lot of them have furloughed a lot of their kind of frontline workers. I don't believe they have, or in a lot of cases, others have stepped up and offered to contribute. So I think, Rick, you hit it on the head. I think they're calling in their insurance. Again, I know enough about the law to be dangerous, so I wonder if there are any act of God provisions out there forbidding that, or force majeure type things. I don't know, but I've got to believe that's part of it. a lot of those revenue streams are just dried up right now. I can't imagine the demand for jerseys has gone up while people are quarantined. So insurance is probably where I'd go too, Kevin.
And see, and this is why it's three guys and an iPad. What it really should be is two smart ones and a dumb one. I'm not quite that in depth. I was thinking of it from the standpoint of, the sports franchises. For example, the NBA, when they got all the owners together to do a vote over should they do the cancellation of the season or, prolong it, go to a ending the season entirely, or go to just empty arenas and finish out the games. There was only one owner who voted to finish out the games. And that, of course, is our good friend and Jack Dolan, is the owner of the New York Knicks, who, haven't been relatives.
Knicks, yes.
Hasn't been relevant since the 60s and 70s. So there's that. And then, so that's kind of the thought process I was putting behind it. So here's where I would like to take you. Think about 2 months ago from now. On the sports scene, what were we talking about? And what were the pundits talking about every single day?
2 months ago, so end of January, early February, I was starting to think about March Madness, rest in peace, beginning of baseball season, NBA playoffs, that sort of thing.
Baseball. The Houston Astros, with their, the owner had, I believe the first week of February, did that fabulous press conference where he, really just basically told the New York Yankees.
Yep. The corporate apology.
Yeah. Yeah, the corporate apology, things of that nature. But since COVID-19, and the sports have all taken a hiatus, no one has mentioned a single word about the trash can banging Houston Astros.
True.
Nobody cares anymore.
True.
So,
true.
These poor guys were getting thrown at in spring training.
Yes. And they will again, Kevin.
I don't know. Well, they'll be on such an abbreviated season, everybody just might get down to work and forget about all of it. So that's what kind of came to mind this week. So if you're a fan of the Houston Astros, if you're the owner of the Houston Astros, or if you're a player, you've been given a reprieve.
True. COVID-19 is a smoke bomb. I hadn't thought about that, but you're absolutely right. So.
Well, and that's why it's three guys and an iPad. You have the dumb one and then the two smart guys.
I think the iPad's a little brighter than me, tell you the truth. But, so. And
then the last part I just want to kind of bring to light is, this week's unemployment filing 6.6 million. So in the past 2 weeks, we've had 9.955 million people file for unemployment. And to put that in perspective, that is the entire city of New York, the entire city of Albuquerque, and the entire city of Phoenix, Arizona, all have filed for unemployment. And that's how many people we're talking about. So I can tell you that in my household, we're going through this process as well. And the website crashes about every 10 minutes. It takes, if you can get on, you can get through the form sometimes a quarter of the way, halfway, 3/4 of the way before it crashes. It takes about 3 days to finally get through it where you can get your form filed. If you are trying to call in, you need to just have your headset on and the phone on auto redial, because in a 4-hour period, you can call over 200 times and not get through. So, and in the state of Texas, we had one day where 1.7 million calls were taken to the unemployment office. So it's a sobering experience, but the reality of it is we'll get through it. And for everybody out there who's having to do that, you're in our thoughts and prayers. And with that, I send it back to you, Brian.
Well, thank you, Kevin. I'm going to keep the segment going a touch longer, though, because you bring something else to mind. We've had similar issues in Ohio And a lot of folks have lauded our governor for being ahead of the curve, but we're having the same problems with our unemployment claims and the website here as well. I'm going to take that in a slightly different tangent, though, and I'm going to ask this to our podcast viewers and you guys as well. Has anyone else noticed that suddenly their internet connections and their 4G, 3G, whatever, suddenly sucks? Anyone else running into that? You guys running into that too?
Yeah.
How about you, Rick?
Yeah, absolutely. I've got a son in the house who's a gamer, and so he's a high bandwidth dude, and he keeps me apprised of our relative speed in the house.
Yeah.
And we've taken a hit. Yeah, I think everybody has.
Yeah. I mean, I'm starting to be grateful I actually did keep my landline, kept it mostly for my alarm system, but I'm actually having to use it occasionally.
Mm.
But and for viewers out there, leave us some notes in the show notes in the comments wherever you're catching this. I'm curious to hear it. I hear a lot of folks talking about it. Don't see a lot of reporting about it. So maybe Verizon and AT&T have decided it doesn't benefit them to hear about it. But I'd love to hear your stories. I'm suddenly running into a lot of dropped calls or partial calls. So
well, now know AT&T and Verizon are doing all those commercials about wanting to help us out. So I think they do want to know.
I do.
That there's some issues. But I have a question for Rick in this regard. And the thing that I find interesting is it appears to me that places like the unemployment office and these types of entities are running archaic systems. And I'm curious why that hasn't been updated, because if you look at industry, there's a lot of companies now that have 20, 30, 40,000 people working remote, and they went into that almost overnight. But the unemployment office can't handle a flood onto their website to file a claim.
Right. So it's often a matter of competition, Kevin, when technological systems get updated. In the mortgage industry, for instance, we're constantly juggling back and forth between systems, modernizing and updating, because competitive pressure on LOS developers forces them to do so. How many other people is the unemployment office in competition with right now? No one. So once their system is in place, they have no incentive to change it. As long as it's doing the job, it's doing the job. And events like this is what forces them government agencies, bureaus, and others, taxpayers and voters, to realize, this is not good enough, and it gets upgraded. So as painful as these things are, there are silver linings like that, and I do expect that all of these agencies are working diligently now to make these systems better, because now they have a reason to do so.
Yeah.
Some good stuff there. Let's move on to the mortgage headline roundup. I've got one piece for your consideration today, and obviously there's been a lot of reporting about COVID-19. How could there not be? Maybe only the biggest event of the last 50 to 100 years, perhaps. I mean, there's probably a few other contenders in there, like World War II or whatnot, but this is getting to be pretty big. Our piece today is actually an opinion piece over at National Mortgage News, and it comes to us from Christopher Whalen. It took place on April 1st. I'll point out to our viewers there was no paywall at the time of our recording. That may change eventually, but if you get a chance to head on over, it's a pretty good piece, pretty thoughtful piece. Take a look. And the headline doesn't get bigger than this in a trade pub, right? Financial tsunami threatens housing sector. Okay, that's, it doesn't get too much bigger than that. And again, that's from our friends at National Mortgage News, Christopher Whalen. And just to give you a brief summary, he points out that we've got now, thanks to the CARES Act, a federal holiday up to a year on $11 trillion in agency mortgages. 11 trillion with a T. And according to Mr. Whalen, I quote, "It's perhaps the largest unfunded public mandate in American history." A lot of this stuff we've been talking about the entire show, guys, it almost requires a suspension of disbelief. And I don't think he's saying anything hyperbolic there, okay? I'm going to go ahead and quote Mr. Whalen further. "Neither Congress nor the federal agencies at this writing seem to know how or even whether these payment holidays will be processed or financed. Little details like the duration of the assistance, the proper process for documentation, and the payment of little items like property taxes and insurance have been omitted in the mad rush by Congress to flee Washington, unquote. Again, opinion piece. I'm going to go on. Mr. Whalen brings out a proposal floated by former Ginnie Mae President Ted Tozier. He's now a fellow at the Milken Institute, and I believe he's on a board or two as well. According to the article, Mr. Tozier is proposing that payments of interest and principal on all agency loans be financed by the U.S. banking sector as an advance at 0% interest to the servicer. Goes on to suggest that the missed payment on the loan should be documented by the lender and recorded in the servicing system as due upon the sale of the house. The banks would then be paid a fee for arranging the advance, which would be financed by the Federal Reserve System in the senior position and the Treasury. And he even goes on to suggest that the Fed could even pay the banks the rate paid on excess reserves. Okay, it doesn't get much bigger than that, guys. So I'm going to turn it over to you. I'm going to throw it out to the peanut gallery. It's clear from the article, and again, it takes the financial and economic perspective, but there's a huge issue here, one that hopefully we won't have to deal with again in the future, but we probably will at some point. Where's the line between protecting the public good from a health and safety perspective and protecting a legitimate industry or even the economy? I mean, this is not the only story dealing with that, and this one deals with the specifics of trying to keep the mortgage industry from collapsing and the servicing industry. But where do you guys think, we're going to get a little philosophical here, where's that line drawn?
Well, I think that, I think the proverbial horse is already out of the barn. So the reality of it is Federal Reserve on numerous occasions, and even the Fed chairman went on the Today Show. When was the last time you ever saw that? To talk about, the Fed carries a big stick, and we're going to make sure that everything is taken care of. I don't see how they have any other choice but to follow some sort of process very similar to what Mr. Tozier outlined. Now, it would make sense to me, since he has been in the industry for a long time, that you pretty much follow what he's outlined as the way to do it. But I think at the end of the day, you have to take the approach that these payments are deferred, tack on to the end of the contract. You pretty much just bring a halt to everything. You pick a time where you stop and a time where you start, and then between, the Fed just covers that expense. Make sure the taxes and all that are being paid, and at the end of the day, I don't know of any other way, because nothing that's going on, and we talked about this last week, and Rick made some great points that I'm sure he's going to bring out again. None of this is because the financial industry failed anywhere. In fact, we were having the best economy in our history, lowest unemployment numbers. And it wasn't just, white middle-aged males that had great unemployment numbers. It was across all sectors, all races, all sexes. I mean, the economy did not fail the American public. And so at the end of the day, do I think that this is what I think FDR had in mind in the New Deal, and this is what I think needs to be revised today in today's New Deal, is that we didn't cause it. It's not our fault. This is what government should step in and do.
Today's New Deal. I love the sound of that, Kevin. That's I'm sure we're going to hear that again a couple of times. Rick, what do you think?
Yeah, it's an interesting philosophical question, Brian, but I don't really think it's an either or. Government in a position like it's in today has an obligation to protect those industries that it can, especially ones that are systemic and part of the overall economy, to the extent that, auto, airlines, real estate, home finance, all those are. But they're also going to try to take care of their people as best they can, or at least appear to. And Whalen, he is one of my favorite industry commentators. I've read him since he was back in Housing Wire, and I love what he does. But the government, yes, they rushed to get this act out and show the American public that they're taking care of them, because they literally had no choice. They had to take some action, and they knew that the full faith and How do they do it? How's it said on the dollar bill? The full faith and whatever of the U.S. government was behind the expenses that are going to accrue and become necessary to make all this happen. A great article. It's perfect for these times. We're going to look back and look at this article in the future and say, wow, that is so dramatic. We should make a movie. We should make the next Big Short movie about this. But what Chris has done is he's buried the lead in the last paragraph. And if you get all the way down to the end of the story, you'll read him say, the good news, this is the last paragraph, by the way, the good news is that Congress and the White House in tandem are slowly becoming aware of the issue of liquidity. And of course they are, and of course they will. Tozer's very smart, wicked smart dude. His plan, as I understand it, very solid. It'll get better before it gets implemented. I've talked to a couple of servicers over the last week, and they're not jumping off bridges. So I think all of this may just be much less of an issue over the course of the next 60 days. I certainly hope so.
Well, you're right, guys. I think it will get sorted. Not everyone's going to benefit equally, and it's impossible to do when you're talking about something as complex as an entire economy and perhaps a global economy. But it will get sorted. Folks, at this point, we're going to jump ahead. We're going to keep it tight this week. My daughter is learning ancient Greek as well from home, so we've got to jump into that lesson here shortly. So let's go ahead and go to our top 10 for this week. And credit to Mr. Breeland. It was his idea. So if you don't like it, take it up with him. We'll put his email address up. Our top 10 question this week is, what will be the straw that breaks the camel's back during your corona quarantine? Okay. Number 10, one more video on LinkedIn advising us that now is the time to be a leader in your market. Number 9, one more video anywhere showing you how to reinvent yourself during hard times. Number 8, one more video from someone who insists on walking, talking, and holding their phone at the same time to show us that they're outside, especially on a windy day. Don't you guys love those? Number 7, just one more video conference during which a Zoom amateur refuses to use the mute button. We've seen some pretty good memes and videos out there already. Let's get us off the video too, guys, please, in some cases. Number 6, the daily power breakfast that consists of a cigar and a stiff drink at 8 a.m. That's not good. No. Number 5, just one more email from a vendor you didn't know you have telling you the CEO you've never heard of cares for you during these trying times. That's a horse we're going to keep beating well beyond death, guys. I promise you that one. Number 4, the COVIDiot in line behind you at the grocery store who insists on being as close as possible to you in spite of your efforts to move away. Number 3, just one more day riding herd over the Ivy League-inspired postgraduate caliber homeschool lessons for your kindergartner. Number 2, just one more helpful article to keep you busy during the quarantine with helpful suggestions such as crafts, arts, dance, advanced learning, and meditation. And number 1, just one more podcast on LinkedIn. Boom. And with that, guys, it's going to be a tight one this week. We'll come back and do it again next week. Kevin and Rick, always a pleasure. And going to have to save a little battery this week for my daughter's ancient Greek. Until next time, folks. Rick, why don't you take us home?
Thanks for watching, guys. Final thoughts today. You've heard us over the last couple of episodes with our top 10 list, kind of make some fun or some of the ways that people are using social media in kind of questionable ways. Next week, be sure to tune in because Brian and I are going to talk to you about some of the ways you should be using social media right now. It's very important as leaders of the industry that you use this opportunity to share thought leadership in a way that calms the people you work with and the people that you serve. We're going to talk about some of the ways that you can do that next week. Until then, thanks for watching.